just open ourselves with humility and with gratitude to the gifts and to the challenges, which are gifts that are arising, that are present on this soul journey. Bowing to them, bowing to what we do not understand, bowing to what is beyond our control, bowing to our past. And remembering that all guidance and all healing and all remembering begins in this moment. And I think we learn something so profound, and this is what astrology seems to teach or remind us, that there's a timing for things. There are phases and there are cycles. And if we just allow ourselves to really, in a devotional way, to be where we are, not trying to have a different experience, not trying to know what we do not know, the flow, the tides of the cosmos will bring us to where we need to go, will teach us what we need to learn. And I find that there's so much beauty in that trust. And there's so much beauty in the humility of really acknowledging that we don't need to be anywhere else. And I'm learning that the application of that trust goes deeper and deeper and deeper. It's always offering itself here too, in this space, in this place, in the very places we didn't want to offer it. And the greater teaching of all experiences is of our safety, is of our love, is of the truth. So we have Saturn stationing direct right now. Anytime a planet stations direct, I always say it's like there's a pulse on that planetary function. And Saturn's important because whenever you look at Saturn doing something significant in transit, we're looking at all of the conditioning that comes with Saturn. Like all of that stuff comes up, right? Saturn, shame, guilt, where we are repressing in order to fit in order to belong, where we don't want to look at certain parts of ourselves or make certain changes because that'll be too scary. And the deepest fear of Saturn in Aquarius is really about not belonging. There's a status quo in the structural reality of our lives and everything in it. Whether it's joyful or works really well, it's feasible, or whether it's miserable, I find we all have a tendency, a default tendency to gravitate towards what is familiar, regardless of how painful it is. Because the security dynamic within Saturn, in particular in Aquarius, is, well, I can know this. This feels safe for me. It's familiar. I belong here. But how much are we repressing? How much are we putting to the side and ignoring and pushing away from our consciousness, and thus kind of pushing it within our subconscious to come out at some point, just for the sake of belonging, just for the sake of, this is secure, this is comfortable. And of course, this is the interface between Saturn and Uranus in general. So Saturn's been in Aquarius, and it's also been in the square with Uranus for a good 2 years. They've had 3 square points as they move back and forth. They're less than a degree from each other right now. And it's been happening while Saturn's been stationing direct. They've been very, very close to each other. But it's this point where Saturn's going to decisively separate. And we can think of it as it's fulfilling, it's actualizing, it's playing out the last quarter square that it is with Uranus. So this Saturn stationing direct is moving from that square. It's leaving that hole. It's been a good 2.5 years of Saturn Uranus. And then it's moving straight into Pisces. It's leaving Aquarius decisively. So it's very clear from that alone, this is a culminative time. This weekend, this week is a turning point relative to Saturn. And so the question that we pose is, where are we called upon to access a deeper agency? Agency and sovereignty in our choosing is a divine right for all of us. It's kind of, we're created with that. And when we claim our agency, when we claim our sovereignty to make choices, we position ourselves to live a life where we are fully present for that which we're doing. When we're not making our choices, when we're not claiming our agency because of fear, because we don't want to know what's on the other end of that, we might look good. Saturn, the shell, the external, the vessel. We might have the title. We might get the accolades. Everything on paper might look exactly the way the people next door say it's supposed to look. Okay, so we have resumed. Speaking about Saturn moving direct, it's just really meaningful to recognize this Saturn moving direct in context with where it's coming from and where it's going. Leaving this square with Uranus for a good 2.5 years and completing its time in Aquarius. And so one of the reasons why we are afraid to claim our agency and to do whatever it takes to live a congruent life where we are fully present, fully here, fully choosing to be where we are, is because to live in that way might mean facing parts of our own being that don't fit into the paradigm or the constructs that we've been a part of. And so on paper, everything might look really good. Everything might look like it's like the ideal life. Society, culture, your neighbors, parents, or your ideas of what's a good life, it might fit all of those check marks. Everything will be totally satisfied. But we have to always get to this place when we do the Saturn work of connecting with a deeper inquiry. Am I joyful? Am I happy? And do I feel fully here in the moment? Do I feel fully present? And I think we don't recognize the extent to which we are celebrated and taught to sacrifice presence and joy, full alignment, full choice, for the sake of the external. Well, this makes the money. This gives me the security. This is the stability that I think I'm supposed to have on paper. And this is the tension between Saturn and Uranus, and really Saturn and Aquarius, because Saturn does say we have to ground, we have to condition our lives. We have to make choices and consciously work on every facet of our life, disciplining ourselves, our habits. Everything that we do repetitively is a part of an ongoing process of crystallization. The patterns, the habits, the thoughts that we repeat crystallize and ground a particular life. And it's what creates something long term. And so we can't avoid the Saturn dimension as long as we're actually in a body. As long as we're manifesting within time-space experience, there's always going to be the need to become aware of our conditioning and what we're consciously creating through the repetition of our patterns, of our thoughts, of our habits. Hold on one moment. Jeffrey Wolf Green talks about the root chakra, and I find this teaching to be so helpful, whether literal or not. I can't speak from my own direct experience, but intuitively this resonates and makes so much sense. The root chakra, which energetically is really about grounding, it's survival. It's like the most basic level of human physical survival, and thus a basic level of security. The root chakra shares a tri-rulership with Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto. It's like Saturn's like the actual spine, the bone. And it's also our conditioning, right? Where we've tightened up for the sake of our security. And all the content that we're pushing at bay so that we can be appropriate, so that we can fit in, so that we can be accepted. And then Uranus is like the individuality of the soul. Contained within the archetype of our soul individuality is also the natural unfolding of our awakening. Right? Uranus isn't developmental in the sense that Saturn is. Uranus is what we are. It's our essential nature. And so within the archetype of Uranus is almost the blueprint for our awakening. It's who we are when we're not suppressing what we are. And so thus contained within the Uranus archetype is all the suppression, all the ways in which we're afraid to liberate, to wake up, which really means living in the unknown. Relative to Uranus, we're in the unknown. We have nothing to hold on to relative to precedent. The freedom of our being isn't identified or defined by time. It's not identified or defined by any social, familial role. It doesn't say I'm a man. It doesn't say I'm a partner. It doesn't say I'm a father or an astrologer. From the point of view of our awakening, we look at all those Saturn things as almost like the most external shell, almost like a little suggestion of, and this is the vehicle that we're working with. And it has no meaning beyond that. Time, form, space, structure, roles. There's no inherent value or meaning in any of them, as much as the world has wanted to give it meaning. But we become so conditioned by it that we suppress what is so natural to our being that it's not developed. Meaning it's we don't have to look somewhere to find it. It's already what we are. And thus the consequence of being what we are, that's the fear within Uranus. There can be an immense amount of fear when we deal with Aquarian Uranian dynamics. Either the fear of what will happen to us, will we lose all the stability, the friendship, the love, the acceptance, the approval? Or we might be so afraid of change that we'll suppress that. We won't want anything around us to change. We won't want others to change. Uranus corresponds to the root chakra because when awakening begins to happen, and Jeffrey Wolf Green described this beautifully as the fissures in the earth during an earthquake. That solidity, even if it looks pretty and nice, it starts to break up. And what's released is Pluto. Pluto being the Kundalini energy, right? Pluto being that underlying soul sovereign power that is eternal and change and infinite, immutable. That awakens through the space that's created with Uranus breaking up all the known. Saturn moving direct really invites us to be very honest, and I would say a more accurate word for Saturn moving direct is to claim our own spiritual adulthood. No one's going to make choices for us. No one's going to tell us what to do. And in fact, one of the maturation points for Saturn is where we realize I can't look to an external authority to gauge my own inner knowing of right. We always have to come to that point where we have to trust ourselves, trust our own inner authority. Moving direct, it says, this might feel scary. There's a whole new world opening up right now, but this is the invitation. Where is Saturn transiting in your chart? Where's Uranus, the ruler of that? And these are the dynamics that are very strong and at play right now. And I would say this coming lunar cycle is going to, if you have a TV show, and the TV show is the Taurus Scorpio eclipse season, Saturn's the star of the show, right? Or like Saturday Night Live, starring Saturn, and they're going to be in all of the skits. They're going to open up the monologue. Everyone's going to be talking about this person starring Saturday Night Live. We'll see in a moment that Saturn all year has been squaring the nodal axis of the moon. So what I want to do now is give our context for what's happening with Saturn some like real practical meat in seeing how is this manifesting, what's the energy of this, how is this showing up for us through this eclipse season. And we often hear eclipses are portals. Energy comes in, energy goes out. It's a powerful time for facing the core content of our soul journey. Twice a year, there will be an eclipse season. This eclipse season in particular, involving a Scorpio South node, is bringing up all of the deeper psychological points of resistance and fear. This new moon on Scorpio is really emphasizing, on one level, what are you committing to? And what are you letting go of? The psychology of entrapment, distrust, fear, all of these things are pointing to the potential for an immense amount of psychological awareness. We want to do our best on this journey to stay clear of the very well celebrated cultural suggestion of close your heart, build a wall. These people aren't for me. This person isn't for me. Because that's just a way of building a wall around our hurt. We want to do our best and really ask for as much help as we need in looking at, okay, I don't want to live here. What's the teaching? If freedom and agency and clarity is my true nature, what's the teaching for me right here? What wants to be seen? And we have a big clue into this with Saturn stationing direct square in the nodes. It really does say, if we're tuning into what can we commit to, what can we let go of, but look at your state of mind. Because your state of mind is what you're going to be structuring and building for the long term. Right? You're going to be building a house and building the foundations and the bricks with that state of mind. So it doesn't matter whether you're saying yes to something that sounds like a great thing to say yes to, or saying no to something that is really not good for you. We want to come from deep introspection relative to what am I building? What am I creating? What is my deepest commitment fundamentally that I can rest in and stick with? When we find that relative to Saturn, there's a sense of, yes, this is a process. This will take a long time. This is a long-term situation. And I have to practice it and stick with it and do my best to do my work every day. And there's a joy that comes with Saturn where we recognize it's not always easy, but there's a growing joy that comes in it. Because we're reconnecting with over and over and over again what's truly most important to us, and that's what's most valuable. Being able to really ground and connect with what's most valuable, what is worth committing to, keeps us clear. And there's a teaching that I received recently in a dream that I want to share here. I wish I had the exact wording, but I got the gist of it. I was told something to the likes of, the practice of acknowledging I don't know what anything means will keep you safe and clear and protect you in every situation. Acknowledging I don't know what something means, I don't know what to do with it, I don't know how to respond to it. That allows us, let's say we're hurt, we're angry, we're incited in a really strong way, or we feel shame or we feel guilt. It allows us to acknowledge its presence, but then it also says, and I don't know what to do with it. I don't know what it means. I don't know how to see this. There's a teaching in A Course in Miracles, it's a prayer. And I got this dream just after reading this prayer, so I think I may have even been told the prayer. I don't know what anything including this means, and thus I don't know how to respond to it. I will not follow and practice my own past learning to gauge how to be in relationship to this moment. Instead, I will learn how to listen and follow higher guidance. That's a paraphrasing of the teaching. I'm not going to reference my past learning. My past learning got me to where I am. And if there is pain and struggle and suffering, maybe there's some joy in our life. But if we're not yet where we want to be, we can't bow to our past learning and put it up on a pedestal and trust it completely. That's the humility of Saturn being a disciple that says, I know what I'm committing to. And if we can really acknowledge and claim within ourselves that our deepest commitment is to a state of peace and wholeness within ourselves and to a state of love and to share that love of our own being and to be in congruency with all of our lives, with all of our relations, to feel on purpose and fully present for what we are doing, then we can really meet the patterns and the conditioning that we're so familiar with that will have us very unconsciously, without thinking about it, moving in the very opposite direction of that congruency. And we have to be willing to meet that. Is this anger? Is this reaction? Is this jadedness? Is this victimization? Is this distrust? Is this righteousness? Is this embarrassment congruent with where I'm trying to go? And this is not to say then repress it or bypass it. I am no fan of that. We actually have to feel it, completely meet it. And that's the journey that we're on, right? We can't learn anything if we're not going to be honest about the fact that we're feeling something. But with a ground in our commitments, we practice a reference point that is greater than our past learning, how we might have otherwise responded to discomfort. The North Node during this eclipse season is also conjunct Uranus, again, just completing this Uranus time. But it's like, it's completing it with a bing. It says there is a whole new path unfolding here. And this Uranus moving into a new phase with, it's retrograde right now, but it's still going to be within a new phase of the North Node. Says there's a whole new cycle unfolding, and in the cracks of the earth there are plants, there's vegetation growing, maybe not the ones you thought you'd be growing, but you also didn't imagine those cracks to be there either. And so there's something that's reorganizing itself here, and that reorganization is aligned. It is best for everyone. It resonates with the vibe of greater inclusivity, togetherness, inclusion. Uranus is all about the intelligence of creation, which itself speaks to in life and creation itself, everything resonates. Nothing doesn't belong. It's not like an exclusive club or like several exclusive clubs. Life is one inclusive club. It's one. And all the different elements within that one ecosystem have a place within it, and it fits perfectly. It's an intelligent design. That's Uranus. And we're a part of that intelligent design, and our own unfolding, our own blossoming, individually, collectively, are a part of that. And so we can't control that. Allow the plants to grow through the cracks. There's an intelligence guiding its growth. It's going to, there are all these people that study the growth of ecosystems. And there's a natural relationship between, I guess, what we can call anarchy and organization. There are always phases in our life where there's a disordering of the Saturn structures that have been defined, but necessarily so. It's a more organic, natural process that resonates with a natural intelligence, right? That's like, this intelligence is greater than our own thinking. It's smart. It's like, why does astrology work? All we can do is recognize that it works and start studying the patterns. The intelligence is already established. So we allow our own souls to be guided and to unfold and to grow and to be organized in a way that is resonant and harmonious with the natural movement of creation itself. And the movement of creation is always to togetherness. That's like the beautiful teaching that we're also always learning. The movement of all things is always moving towards togetherness, towards inclusion, towards an unconflicted state of being. The conflicted state of beings happen when we're trying to build these walls to protect ourselves. It says, you go over here, you do this, you be this, you play this role, and I'll be here playing this role. And as long as I've decided that that's where that line is, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be okay. So with Uranus on the North Node, and of course, it's the ruler of Saturn, right? Squaring the nodes. It speaks, this entire eclipse season is really highlighting this year-long transit, this year-long process of Taurus North Node, Uranus and Taurus. It's time for the new. And it's really not something we can control. That's what I feel about this eclipse season. It might feel scary, and there might be many, many dimensions, many elements that we don't feel comfortable with. And the temptation to want to revert into the conditioning. I think one of the core teachings that we can just draw upon continually during this eclipse season is, I don't have to know. I don't have to know. But what I do know and what I can rest in is what I'm committed to, what I'm devoted to, what I'm disciplining, what I'm at the core, what is most important to me. And we all have the capacity to find that. When we find our commitments and it feels rested, it's not followed by any other contradictory thoughts, right? Or justification. It just rests in itself. That means it's authentic. We all have the capacity to soul search and find that. So let's take a look at the next eclipse just to connect with that energy. So here Mercury will be moving through Scorpio over the South Node on the Sun. And This will be during the lunar eclipse, which itself will be on Uranus. So, and it's tightly squaring Saturn. So in my astrological read of this full moon on November 8th, here in the US at least, is the stronger of the two. One, it's a tighter eclipse, they're closer to the nodes, and the planets involved are tighter. It's closer to Saturn, closer to Uranus. So we can think of it in two ways. One reference is Mercury. What is the information, the conversations, the investigations, the thoughts, looking inside, uncovering more perspective, more knowledge, more insight. There is an essential learning that's happening as Mercury is moving through this hotspot. In fact, even after this eclipse, Mercury will then come into lockstep square with Saturn, which I think itself will reflect a further clarification and crystallization. These could be essential life choices, whatever that might be, right? The changes we're going to make in our life, in our job, in our relationships, in our purpose, in our passions, what we're going to commit to. We can really allow this to be a time where we're just asking the important questions. Mercury in Scorpio. Of course, Venus is involved as well on the south node, then moving through this whole eclipse, going to be squaring Saturn up until just after the full moon lunar eclipse. So of course, what are our agreements? Fundamentally, Venus in Scorpio, yes, our relationship to our soul, and how everything in our life is reflecting our fundamental relationship and allegiance to our own soul sovereignty. But then how are we expressing that? How are we communicating? How are we opening to a deep, radical, core, honest intimacy to be seen, to be heard in the deepest parts of our own being? Are we willing to listen deeply, even if that listening shakes things up? Because this is a shaking things up kind of time. It's also, just while we're here, at the very end of the month, Mars goes retrograde, right? It's going to be in conjunct to Pluto, and Pluto, of course, ruled all of the South Node Scorpio stuff. This further speaks, and I've spoken about this before, and I'm sure I'll do more videos. Mars moving retrograde is like, okay, I'm going, okay, I don't know where I'm going. But what are my questions? What's the information that I have? And you take it one step at a time. More information, more perspective, the larger picture. I've often given that analogy here. We're just a fly on an elephant. There are so many pieces that we haven't seen, that we haven't put together yet. And so there's a whole lot of learning. And also in that learning is a whole lot of trusting our instincts. A sort of a deeper soul level, maybe instinct isn't, a deeper soul level calling that says, do this. And we don't have to understand. We just are to trust. And we also have Jupiter just left Aries, going into Pisces. What's really neat is Jupiter and Neptune are squaring this Mars. There's a whole lot of letting go of all the beliefs, the ideas, the formulations, the logical formulations we've created. I often say, logic can argue anything, even that which is insane. Like, being logical doesn't mean being sane. It doesn't mean it's true, but anything can be justified. And so I think there's a lot of letting a lot of our thoughts and ideas and expectations and plans and logical formulations, letting them fall away in light of the truth, in light of the true openness to learn.